So I've got my reference here, and I've transferred it over onto the canvas paper. And I've got my palette set up. This is my girlfriend here, and her favorite color is purple or violet. So I'm gonna mix violet with equal amounts. Now you could do it in just monochromatic blue or red, but you could also do a secondary color like violet or orange or green or whatever. So you can do this in whatever color you want, even the tertiary color. You could do like a yellow green or something. So I've got my thing here. So I've got the violet mixed up. And now all I need to do is make tints and shades of this color. So I'm going to put this here. And when I make this, and I want to do this, like I'm going to show you some different things. For one, we need to match the value of what we're doing. So the darkness of this, if I squint at it, is pretty close, but I want to make it a little bit duller. So I'm going to add a little black to it. And when you do this, I want you to test it on your paper. And now that's a little bit darker, but that's okay. If you make your darks a touch darker, that's going to be all right. But you want to make your lights lighter. Now when we apply the paint, I'm trying to hold the camera with one hand and paint with the other, but we want our brush pretty well loaded up. So I'm going to load it up, I'm going to push my bristles into it, and I want to make sure I have enough paint. I'm going to put a little more black in here. So now I've got a shade of violet, and I want to apply the paint evenly and opaquely. So I don't want any blotches, and we want clean edges. We don't want it messy. It needs to be very neatly and thoroughly applied. So I wonder, it's kind of hard to paint with one hand where I can't and hold this at the same time. Now this is kind of blotchy here. So if it's that thin and blotchy, that's not appropriate. It needs to be opaque. It needs to be thoroughly covered. So I'm gonna grab a little more paint, and if you need to get more paint, then get more paint. But the object of this, after you've got it drawn, is simply value matching. Does your value that you mix match the value of the reference? And the way to test that is to put that on your paper and make sure the value matches. So again, I want clean edges. I can use the tip of my brush, or I can make an edge by kind of making a stroke. If I have enough paint on my brush, the edge of the brush will make a stroke, giving me a clean edge. And then we want a smooth, even application of paint that's not blotchy. Now you can use even a bigger brush and kind of use the corner of the brush to kind of shape things and get the application you want. Now, so that's a dark. I'm gonna rinse out my brush here. Got a paper towel here. Now I want to show you mixing the lighter color. Now if I mix a light, again, I'm going to do, let's say, a couple of values of her face. Now her face here is almost white. So I'm going to take a hunk of white, pull it out here, and I'm going to take just a touch of the violet and put it in white, because that's how we make tints, remember? So we start with white and we add the color to it. Now I'm going to touch this onto here and see that value is pretty close. That's almost exactly right. So in here, I'm going to apply it, and again, I want you, the whole goal with this is good craftsmanship. Now in a big shape, you want to use a bigger brush. It's getting some of that darker color. I'll blend that in. And we want to go right up to the edge. Blend this a little bit more. Have a nice even application of paint. And so we want it opaque, we want it even, not blotchy, not other streaks of color. We don't want to see the canvas through it. It needs to be thoroughly applied right up to the edges. So I didn't clean my brush out well enough. You see how some of the streaks are coming in. I'm just going to blend them in. Now see that tiny little dot here from a little mark? I can come back in and apply that later with a smaller brush after the fact. That's a darker area. I've got another brush here. So for the smaller details, like I said, the nice thing about paint is if you make a mistake, you can paint right over the top of it. It's not a big deal. So I've got a darker value, so I want to mix up a value that is close to that value right there. So I'm going to start with the dark and mix it with the light. And now I'm not going to just guess at it. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to actually maybe put a little dot of it there. And that's pretty close. That's nearly the identical value. So I can come and put that shape in and just kind of put in that dot. Now, any place I mix a value, I'm going to mix a little bit more of this. Let's see what this value is here. Let's see if my value that I just mixed would work there. One thing you can do, gosh, that almost is exactly the right value. One thing you can do is kind of squint at your picture. So this does seem about dark enough to come in. Now here's an edge. So I want to make sure. Now don't leave a white gap between your colors. Sometimes students do that because they're afraid of overlapping at the edge. Don't leave a white gap. Let it overlap, let it touch each other at the edges. Make sure your brush is loaded well enough that you can actually apply the paint. If the paint's not flowing anymore, don't just water it down to get it to flow. Mix more paint. And if you don't have enough paint, then go back and get what you need to mix it. So basically this is paint by numbers, and we want to match the value. The value matching is so important. It's absolutely essential to doing this right. And you should be touching your paints to your reference image that you mix up, just to make sure, because if you just eyeball it, you'll never get it right. You might get lucky and get some of it right, but most of it will end up wrong if you don't make a point to touch it onto the reference and be certain that it's a match, because your brain can trick you. Talked about lots of things in art where your brain can kind of fool you into believing something that's not true, and that can happen with mixing values as well. So now this is just beginning. I'm going to end up finishing this. Let's see, that value. And another tip, any place you have a value, you already got the paint mixed. Oh, that seems almost too dark over there. I'll make this a little bit lighter. So by mixing my color and white and black, I can get the values. Let's try that there. That looks a touch too light, so I'm going to get, so you go back and forth until you get it where it needs to be. Touch too light. There we go. That's kind of in between there. That actually seems just right. So there I am in my Goldilocks zone. Just right. So I'll paint and apply this again. Smooth, opaque, completely covering the canvas. Clean edges. We're doing hard edge technique. And if you make a mistake, don't get upset by it, because you can restate, you can repaint, you can get things. Like I think I made a mistake. I think I went a little too dark initially with this. Another thing to remember also with acrylic paint is that when it dries, it darkens. So the more you paint with something, with acrylic, it's not true with oil paint, but it's true with acrylic paint, that it gets darker as it dries. So with your lighter values, it's good if you're going to make a mistake or an error to err more on the side of going a little bit lighter than you think you need, rather than a little bit darker. So matching values. Let's see what this is. I want to try to do this dark part under here now. Now when you look at that, you see clearly that's too light. So come and mix. And maybe even put a touch of black in there to kind of dull it down. Because since that's a shadow area, let's see if that matches a little better. It's still a little too light, so I'm gonna grab some more violet. Some more violet. And maybe a touch more black. Touch it there and see. And when I squint at it, that's almost dark enough, but like I said, the darks dry a little bit darker, so I'm gonna put that on there, and by the time it dries, it'll be a little bit darker than I have it, and we'll be okay. You take your time, good craftsmanship. There's not a race. You know, you let your head get into what you're doing, and take your time doing it. Going right up the edge. Now, so I did this area here above her lip. Now I want to get this dark shadow under her nose. I'm going to need to go even darker. And grab some more violet to get darker. And I'm going to grab maybe a touch more black. Let's see if that's dark enough. So touch onto that. Squint at it, squint my eyes. And that's close to dark enough. I'm going just a touch darker. Just a touch darker. Just a little change at a time, gradual changes. So now I'm doing the shadow area in here. Let's touch that. That looks like it's pretty good. So now I'm going to do the shadow area. And that doesn't look substantially darker. I think I went too dark with that other reference, that other value. So, and again, as you do this and do your shapes, like find other areas that have the exact same value and paint those in too. Like this little shape over here. That's pretty close. I'll fill that in. So I'll find other spots. That area underneath. Maybe could use a little bit more contrast, but as I get things filled in, I can come back in as I develop my painting and get things where I need them. So come back in for this light value over here again. Let's touch that there. That's pretty good. Now, nothing on your painting in the end should be just the canvas. Even if you want something pure white, you need to paint it, not just let the canvas show. So, again, I want to have these edges, clean edges, neat craftsmanship, no little white gap between shapes. So filling that in. So this is a start, not done, it's just start. Looks kind of rough, but by the time I'm done, everything will come together. Trust the process.